this is Gamer1745 with, yeah, a late start, very late. Oh, that's okay. Yeah, just making sure that we are live on the interwebs here, and like I say, to the few people who actually sort of care and try to show up, I am sorry for being late, late. Um, and hello, Arno. Good to see you. Yes, you're one of my good friends. Sorry for being late on you. I just stayed up too late last night is the real reason, though I also went to a gun show, so I'm sore. Oh boy, I walked a lot. So, okay, just check different interwebs. Yes. Why didn't it come over here? Don't know. Why did we not see that on Restream? Arno's comment there. And hello, Turinlo. Turnlova. That did come over, so that's good. Right. Okay. Rough start. Rough start of my morning here as well. Okay. Well, we are still taking a look at Master of Command, and you know what they did? They updated the game. Now we can show invalid saves. I did start one of these and play it just a little bit, and it worked, but I figure we should start a new campaign. So it is both good and bad. Good that they are dealing with things, bad that we have to start a new campaign. Yes. Use unlocks button to open the game's achievements. Most achievements in Master of Command provide unique unlocks ranging from renowned historical regiments to brand new army command. Okay. You can hover over it. Okay, regimental unlocks. We'll hit that. Okay. Guess there's nothing more. So far, okay. Just getting started, escalating quickly. It begins. Okay. Yes, Arno. The old man waking up from his winter sleep. Well, I don't know if winter has much to do with it, but I stayed up too late. I am sore from walking so much yesterday. Didn't get a lot at the gun show, but damn, I had fun. Saw lots and lots of interesting things. Best gun show I have been to in years. Okay, so we're going to continue with, or restart here with Prussia. Okay, we are players. We are going to continue with Major. We want to do historical enemies. Yes, I see you over on YouTube as well, so your test is testing. Okay, so Carthaginian Spirit Doctrine is acquired. Okay. Secure foreign encampments. Russian troops join your army. Reinforcements. Freikorps Jaegers join your army. I think this is the one we were playing before. speed penalty. Move speed penalty is ignored. Okay. Flanking fire damage. Okay, I like that. This time we fight the Austro-Hungarian. Well, this time I guess just the Austrians, really. I don't know what do you call them? The Habsburgs probably is the best, because their whole project is anti-nationalistic. For those of you who don't know, we're playing Master of Command, which is 18th century, which is a period of time I love to study. I mean, there's a lot of really good things about the period, but the lack of indoor plumbing, the lack of electricity. I grew up in a time before, computers existed, but they really weren't, in the home. Yeah, when I was, a bit older, yeah, we started to get some computers and whatever, because my dad is into technology. Oh, I think the first one I hardly paid attention to. It was a little... Texas Instruments thing or something, I forget. The one I really, really was interested in, the first one I got, was an original Apple II. Yeah, I go back all the way to the Apple II. Not 2 Plus, not the Mac. I remember when the Mac came out. Yes, old man prattling here. But, and I know what I'm talking about, which is Austrian. The current EU is something of a feature, shall we say, of the Habsburgs. Those, I know Arno lives in the EU here. Did you know that the EU is just continuation? That's a bit strong. But it comes under the Habsburg project. Otto, the heir to the Habsburg throne at the time, at the time of World War II, etc. After the fall of the Habsburg monarchy in Austro-Hungary, or fall of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, he was very much involved in the creation of the proto-elements of the EU. The EC, the European, common market, European community. Yes, Arno, we know you hate the EU, but he very much, and he was, for a time, I don't know, because again, at the stages of I could go look this up, I know, but he was involved in all of that. So I'm not saying the Habsburgs control the EU or something dramatic like that. I'm not saying they don't either, and control, but it's definitely this anti-nationalistic. It's definitely this overarching element to the to Europe that the Austro-Hungarian Empire was. The AEIO, the mysterious initials on the Habsburg thing. And you know, Arno comes from the Netherlands, and who was the rulers of the Netherlands? They were the Habsburgs. It was part of, you know, the great Habsburg Empire, which at that time also controlled Spain. You know, what we say the Low Countries, which include, because Holland is the Netherlands is bigger than just Holland, and it's sort of those which included Belgium, modern day Belgium, and modern day Netherlands, sort of as a unit. It's sort of the Dutch Protestant revolt from Habsburg control that forms the Netherlands. But they, you know, as well as controlling what we see as Austria, but they also controlled other powers at the time. It's later, after the Austrians, or the Habsburgs, I should say, use what language is appropriate. After the Habsburgs lose control of the Netherlands, is when the Bourbons take control over in Spain during the time of Maria Theresa. So, yeah. Okay, so we're going to fight. We're going to reinforce Hanover here. This is going to be different. So we're going to try this, which we reinforce 4 outposts. We'll get a Freikorps unit and get this doctrine. So yes. All right. Okay, so we have all of those resources. I know this better now. Von Arnholt Dessau is our commander. We have Prussian Dragoons, Prussian Musketeers, Cantonist, and Cantonist recruits. So let's go with our Prussian Musketeers to start with. We have this, I believe these are the same. We're gonna go damage received and fire damage received less. So we'll go with the Bible. Additions, and we'll go with cylindrical ramrods. Obviously these are gimmicky things. You know, okay. The idea of a more than just drummers in every unit, which you would obviously have somebody. You command shouts once battle is going is just not enough. You may or may not be heard, but all of the soldiers also know. Now I know this is a Pfeiffer, but know the drum beats that vary for different activities, like forming up or whatever. Okay. Here, move speed. Six. We're going to do this to make up for some of the morale loss. So, stamina. Okay. General, your army stands at the frontier. Though modest in size, your forces are disciplined and in good order. Nearby depot lies ahead, lightly defended, and will serve as a starting point to begin with your campaign. Although you need to press onward soon after land is open, the roads are clear, ideal for seeking skirmishes and encounters. Okay. All right. You need to reinforce 4 outposts. Let's go down to this outpost and secure 5 battlefields. Okay, let's see. So we volunteers, which will delay by up to 2 weeks, 1 week. Get reservists. Um, we have a fair amount of ammunition. Delay the enemy HQ, which is meaning the big battle. All right, we'll do that. We can do that. So now we have one of the four. We got a battlefield out here. We have another one to the north. Head out. Oop, we got a convoy. What options do we have here? Your Grace, a group of merchants passing through the area. Under light guard, they request assistance defending their wagons from bands of highwaymen. We must assign them a portion of our reserves, or we may assign them a portion of our reserves and ammunition, whether modest or generous, but must be understand that anything we commit shall be at risk. Okay, so we provide a small escort. Lose 4 reservists. We might get them back, of course. Well, in for penny, in for pound. Let's go for this. Large escort, your grace. The detachment return. With the merchants in good order, the escort beat off 2 attempts of highwaymen. Keep their lines. Wagons kept their lines and reached. Okay, so we lose some because we get back 340. We receive 2 civilian items and 60 thalgers. Okay, so large harvest sacks and iron ramrods. Camp mode. Okay, that's been filled up. Load speed, and here yeah, it's not that much slower. Okay, amongst the thickets east of the battlefield, our scouts have discovered a wounded officer evidently left behind in our allies' retreat. His uniform and bearings suggest a man of rank. Pray for him. And our prayers were answered. We have got an additional. Did we? Oh, we see these guys here. Okay. Not. Well, where are you going? Okay. Battle is joined. We have French Fusiliers, Royal Recruits. Oh, we're fighting the French. What? Well, they were coming up from there. I thought we were fighting Austria-Hungary, but now that I see the flag clearly, that's definitely the fleur-de-lis of the French royal house. So we are fighting the Bourbons. Okay. The Bourbons. All right. Okay, so we're gonna do. Come over here. Do that. That is going to be our deployment. Wow. Tricky, tricky, tricky. See here now our maneuvering. We can give these guys up onto the hill. they've got a nice stream in front of them, so at least going through there is going to slow them up a bunch. So they're going to try to hide behind the stream. Now the one sort of, as I'm looking at this, by putting these guys up here forward, they may sort of be singled out for combat because they're going to be the furthest forward deployed. And these are not our best troops. These guys we're going to hit over there. Okay, go. Now, I've been talking a lot, and I know there's just a few people on YouTube and Twitch right now. Many of you have been around a bunch, but I've been talking a lot about the what we lost in World War One. And I take that to be the more tragic war now than World War II. More damage to humanity. I know more people die in World War II. But I really do take it as being the costlier war for humanity. And I think it was Dino who helped me with this. What we lost was sort of the human touch, I think is the term that he used. And what I say is what there were elements already starting with this, so this isn't like something purely new at World War II. And what replaces the human touch is cogs and formulas, is what I call them. What I call it. Cogs, people treated as if they were cogs. With enough education and enough training, anybody can do anything, people, yeah, sure, some people are smarter and some people are more stupid, but everybody can learn to read, and since everybody can learn to read, we can teach them anything. Again, some people will be slower, some people will be quicker on the uptake, but everybody is just a cog to be shaped to fit the machine. Okay, here is this. So, and we're fighting over formulas, which could be business plans or economic plans. Like business plans is, how do you organize your company? Could be a company in the Soviet Socialist Republics, meaning a state company. Or it could be, privately owned in capitalistic country. And it's also, over capitalism or communism or whatever. We're fighting over cogs and formulas. We're here. There really wasn't there was the personal touch. To look at this, I presume many of you watching have heard the term martinet, a martinet, as being a commander who is A cell sounds more human than cog. Yeah, but see, it's for the machinery. They're turning. I get you, folk, but they're turning people into cogs for their machine. Both. It could be, in a machine as in a factory, in one big machine like or a series of machines that work together to produce something. I like cog, but it's the machine of government, the machine of society. Everything is seen in machine terms. And so Martinet, he was, and it is a he. I'm not remembering the details, but he was a French drill master. One of these guys here. The guy with a whip, if you will, to try to make you regimented, like these guys here, so that they're all fighting together as a machine. So yes, there are definitely elements, and Martinet, I believe, was like early 18th century, really trying to, in sort of this, and that's why his name, a Martinet, is seen as an extreme person to try to do this, because and it is quite correct. These guys, you don't want them to think, okay? And I mean that. You don't want them to think. This is where, if you look at propaganda movies made during World War II, there's some great ones out there. But several of the American and or British ones um, make Nazi soldiers out, and there's one where they're actually sort of told, and they goose step off a cliff or some cliff, told by a spy in German uniform, and they all just obediently goose step, in line one after another off a cliff. And and it just, because and you look at the Nazi parades, that everyone's goose stepping in very proper order, very strict order, and it looks very nice, very regimented, and that they're taking, and so they see that in the newsreels, people, and so then people in Hollywood or whoever come up with that the German army is somehow this great regimented machine, but in fact the U.S. Army in World War II is much more of a regimented machine than the um, the German Army. The German Army fought down at the most junior NCO levels much more than the American armed forces did. The armed forces, or the U.S., would give orders to take this hill, but they would say, "Yeah, I want you to send your first platoon here. I want you to have your second platoon sort of back here covering fire. And I want to have your third platoon attacking here." Let's just say that this is like the battalion commander telling your company commander how to do it. Where in the German army, they just give, "Oh, company commander, take the hill." And the different levels of command were taught to think for themselves, whether it's like company commands or whether it's squad commands. And still to this day, because I've been trained in the U.S. Army style, as well as to be an officer in the U.S. Army. And I didn't complete ROTC. It was the coming of the Clinton era and the downsizing of the military and the end of the Cold War. So I decided not to continue to being in the Army. In those days, I had other opportunities that I wanted to do that would have precluded going into the Army. But I did go through Army ROTC training, and I've talked to one of my good friends, Fritz, who had been in the German Army, and comparing and contrasting the different styles. Oh, and Fritz did, for a few months at least, I forget exactly, less than a year, I know, but I don't know, I don't remember whether it was like 6 months or 4 months or 3 months or something like that. He served in a mixed command that was commanded by Americans. So he has served under American officers at some point as well, not in the American Army, but under its officers. So they have much more freedom of actions within their command structure. So, and I would still say to some degree the modern, though I'd say more in the East German army, quite honestly, though the Soviets were trying to have their say over how the East German army was running, but are still inheriting Frederick the Great's army. And definitely up into World War II, it very much is a continued lineage of evolution of styles, if you will. So, but here, especially, you don't want these guys to think. You don't want them to think at all. You want them to have muscle memory and drill so that they will, and again, like I talk about, whether it's shouted commands and how are you going to understand that on the battlefield when somebody's shouting German at you? Hey, Sing, good to see you here. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing good. So, to a sound or series of sounds, drumming. Sorry, I need to take a drink. That the people would do what they're told, and you don't think about like running away. You load and shoot your musket. At the right sound, you fix your bayonet. At the sound of advance, you advance. That kind of thing. And each of these armies were different. I know the British Army the best. It's drilled the best in this period. So, these are elements of cogs and formulas. Definitely predate World War I. But you were fighting over one formula, basically, or one type of formula. But mostly, you weren't fighting over nationalism, because borders would change, but you wouldn't mostly. There are exceptions. It was just who was going to be ruling over you. And if, as earlier on, we were talking about the Habsburgs as sort of the extreme example. But the French army is filled with foreign units, Swiss units, at this time, Irish units. At this time you would also have a Scottish unit, the Royal Écosse. And other ethnic groups within it, as well as just simply recruiting people that, hey, you want to join our unit, kind of thing. So Sing is asking how you are, Arna. I don't know if you're watching YouTube chat, but so they weren't really fighting for France. The Prussian soldiers really weren't fighting for Prussia, because if you look at a map of what Prussia was this time, it's not like we sort of think of East Prussia out, in an island of Poles, or West Prussia kind of thing around Berlin. No, there were bits and pieces of Germany everywhere. And although we are fighting the French here, they were often fighting the Bavarians or the Austrians. So it wasn't like fighting for particular nationalities. You were fighting for the elites. And I know a lot of modern people would find that to be bad because they've been so indoctrinated into democracy and equality. But what do you really want to put your trust into? Okay? A formula? I fight for fill in the blank. For communism, for capitalism, for socialism, for democracy, for totalitarianism, for authoritarian, what do you fight for a formula? My formula versus your formula. Some people will go nationalism. Well, that's the rise of nationalism, and we can see proto-nationalistic elements, but I really would not, and I have studied a bit, I would not call the Dutch revolt from the Habsburgs to be a nationalistic revolt at its core, what they're fighting and dying for. I would call it a religious, because they were Catholic rulers over Protestant descent. I'll get to your question in a moment. Sing, please wait. So, we see eventually helped heavily by the English. I'm not sure how much some of the other Protestant groups, but definitely by the English. We do see the creation of modern day Netherlands, but we also see the Habsburgs holding on to the southern Netherlands, which is today called Belgium, because that area is, it was definitely a mix, but was mostly Catholic. And with the creation of the Netherlands, shall we say, there was a certain amount of people movement based upon, hey, I don't want to live in this Protestant area because I'm Catholic, or hey, I can get away from Catholic rulers and go live over amongst a bunch of Protestants. So there's definitely some movement like that, but I would say it's much more along the idea of the one sort of formulas, and I was getting here, that they were fighting over. And it was over the formula of belief in religion. By this point, the 18th century, not just the 7 Years' War, there was on one side, within Europe, there were three big sides within Europe. One side would be the Catholics, and they were not fighting each other. They often did fight each other, but they were not fighting each other over religion. They were fighting each other over which group of elites do you support. Now, the other main faction are the Protestants. By the 18th century, there were definitely different flavors of Protestantism, including, the Anglicanism of the Church of England, which is just sort of Catholic light. But then you can get some of the more extreme Calvinistic type beliefs that you'll find in places like parts of Switzerland and the Netherlands. And then some more moderate Lutheranism you'll find like in Germany and other places. And then, of course, the third, which is around and definitely comes into effect when we were, earlier on when we took the scenario of being the Prussians and fighting the Russians, the Orthodox Church. It's mostly from the European perspective, it's mostly a Russian power group. So, and I know we're not playing the game right now, I'm talking about this, but I think it's important. I wish I had a bigger audience because what I think I have to say is important. Now, of course, you did have, by this period, and well before it too, you were fighting the Muslims, and the Hindus, in India, because the 7 Years' War definitely is played out partially in India. So you do have fights over religion, and that's going on at this time. But otherwise, it's fighting over elites, and there, and I think, and I'm formulating my thoughts even as I speak here. I think one of the reasons nationalism isn't as important as it becomes. Nationalism really as a strong force. Not again, there's definitely, shall we say, localism. People in my area, my city, my county, my valley, my whatever experience. And then the other people, the foreigners, could just be the people in the next valley. But the foreigners. And, us versus them, definitely. And that is proto-nationalistic in and of itself. Now, there are other, one particularly comes to mind is the Declaration of Albrecht in 13 something, I believe. That is a nationalistic Scottish document. But you do have that, but you're more fighting for the elites. Now, elites are more apparent in this time period, partially, and they do think your intelligence level is much, or how smart or stupid you are, and part it comes down to either your education or your ability to educate. And yes, and they don't mostly, when they say somebody is smart or dumb or whatever, they're not necessarily saying that one of these little guys in here is what we would think of as modern day intelligence. How intelligent they are. To a degree, yes, but they're conflating, putting together both your intelligence, your genetic intelligence, shall we say, individually, as well as your education. Can you read and write? Have you, even if you can read and write, how many books have you read? And so if you get somebody who hardly has read a single thing, and they may be very, very smart, very bright, but they've lived in a small town, they haven't been anywhere, they know their job and their community well, they may be respected as a bright person within the community, but they don't know hardly anything. I mean, they know what they know. Go attack, yes, yes. We can do that while I continue to talk. So we're going to let them come into our line of fire here. Hello. Plan Dunavciel. I am sure I'm butchering it. Don't mean to be. Okay, so these guys are coming into our line of fire. They're getting ready to fire. They fired way too early, in my opinion. I wish I could control that. We're going to wait for them to fire at my troops here while we reload. these guys here and these guys here will have a little better time. Okay, you form up, fire at my troops. Will they get a second shot off before these guys can get their first? So, okay, now that they've fired, these guys are going to charge. Specified charge. So we've got these. No, we're going to specify you. There. A little bit through the trees. These guys have had 2 volleys. These guys only had 1 on my troops and they're retreating, but that isn't going to matter. You know, give these guys more volleys because we're going to move them up here. Just keep them from firing, wasting their shot at these guys that are going away. Is this a translation of the Russian phase? I can put any material? Possibly. If we're talking cogs, particularly, cogs and formulas. And so in a modern day sense, in the very modern day sense, a person in Africa who has some sort of basic cell phone can get an education. He can become a rocket scientist if he wishes to. And it's more, shall we say, whether they have the desire to learn it. But still, I don't think it invalidates elites. Now, also coming into the 20th century, in the 19th century, you definitely have this, cogs and formula already happening. Things don't just realistically happen overnight, shall we say. Meaning we don't go, from something being frozen. Obviously, we in a modern microwave or something, we could talk about it. But we normally don't go from something being frozen to something like water being frozen to water boiling. There's a transition period, and because things happen organically mostly. Obviously, we have, in which we see in like revolutionaries. We can think of the Bolsheviks as a extreme example, or we could look at the Maoists who are taking traditional Chinese people and trying to massively reshape them in a single generation. And part of that just entirely comes down to, okay, they're retreating. Entirely comes down to this cogs and formulas, in the sense that people are blank slates, and if we just get to them early enough, and we can train them to be whatever it is. Because they're retreating. They haven't broken just yet, and I didn't want them to move too piecemeal into it. And I'm hoping these guys do just what they did and fire. Now they're shattered. Okay, so Yeah, I can play and chat. So yes, you do get, overnight attempts to being, um, you know, I could talk about the Bolsheviks or the Maoists trying to change everything overnight. But even there, yes, that's newly introduced to, say, um, to the Chinese, particularly, the Russians, generally to the masses. Yes, I see Singh, but I'll get to it. But your comments about Putin. That you guys charge now that they've fired your ways off, but you're facing the wrong way. You guys were gonna just warm up here. I don't hardly know if it's gonna matter. And and we're talking like regimented here, where they're trying to turn people into cogs of the machine of the the regiment. So now they've changed to face these guys. You can see their morale quickly collapsing. Smaller unit might use some help. We are losing some of our people, but victory. And hey, $216 and stuff. Okay, do we want? Okay, do we want provisions? We're down to 347. Do we want reservists? Ammunition. We have a lot of ammunition. Buy some food. Yeah, we'll go with conscripts. Right. Okay. Cannot equip those. We could equip coffee rations, great coats, bees rations, and a 10-pound artillery. But yes, okay, so reload +4 move speed. Now these have -2 move speed, so we will balance that out. Now we come over to our horsies. Let's give them great coats, which will reduce melee damage. Morale and stamina increased by cheese. Oh, wait. Yeah. There we go. So we've now improved our unit. We want to come over here and some of our troops. We definitely need those guys ammo too, even though they mostly run around and shoot at people. Okay, so here is local resistance. They're not friendly to us, so we don't get too good of a deal. Let's head up. We got a camp and some slums. I don't like. They definitely had slums in the 18th century, but slums are part of a city. I would put that as hovels or some other sort of term for rundown, because these are obviously not in the midst of a big urban area. Rundown country, territory here. Hovels or some sort of. See if we can come here. Now we have an extra officer, so we might be able to do some hunting. Oh, we have horses. Okay. Train good horses. Okay, we'll do. You come upon a small band of wild horses, likely once domesticated but left to wander by those fleeing the war. We may attempt to corral some yielding. Well, nice, but that is unrealistic. Um, you don't just get horses and decide to. Okay, speed, melee damage, move speed. Let's go with Parisian horses for current Prussian dragoons. Horses need to be heavily trained. Yes, turn them into. Horse breeders. Fresh recruits. Supply surplus. Let's come down here to these guys. See if we can get some more supplies. Okay, yeah, I see Putin was in India 2 days. 16 deals signed, like Raylos and Russia is going to build a nuclear plant here. Well, that might be good for you. All these. Now we've stocked up on lots of food. Let's head out again this way. We're doing well here in America. We're killing drug boats. Now I know there's a lot of controversy right now over what the orders were given for the drug boats, but oh boy, shouldn't we just capture them? Well, we've been doing that for years and it has no effect. When somebody offers you, you know, a potential for a new life, but even something that's going to help your family, even if you fail, you may be willing to take that gamble, and that's what they've been willing to do. A lot of people have been willing to take the gamble on the drug boats, and even though we capture a lot. Now, you got to remember a couple of things. Couldn't we just capture these drug boats? Well, these boats are very, very fast, and they're moving across the ocean. I don't know. I mean, we could try to fly aircraft out there, including helicopters, but even helicopters are only so fast. And so if you fly a plane over it, what's good that going to do you? You know, you got a jet, boom, flies over a drug boat. Drug boat guys look up. Yeah, so what? They keep going. Do we have ships in the path that can intercept these guys that are going fast? Now, a missile goes very fast, so we can shoot them. We can fire a missile. We got missiles that'll go 100 miles and be able to hit a boat. You know, so we just have to be sort of in the area. We don't have to actually, you know, be close enough to intercept them. Oh, well, we have fast boats too. Yeah, and we probably, you know, and it's still, even the Caribbean, you know, the Caribbean Sea is still a fairly large area. And we might have a bunch of ships sitting off of Venezuela. And we might be able to capture all these boats. But if we were looking at these people and seeing them as what they've been designated as, you know, can Trump do X, Y, or Z? Well, it's still somewhat controversial. But we have generally been going, hey, we can kill terrorists. We identify somebody as a terrorist. We can send a missile into them, whether they're in somebody else's country, their own country, or out at sea. And we've designated some of these groups as being terrorists. So I don't know that we're under any obligation to check and see if they're armed. We just identify them as terrorists. They're, when Germany sent in spies into America during World War II from submarines, and they did that at least once. Was it Operation Pistorius or something? I forget. Am I sick? Yes. I'm recovering from a cold. I'm still recovering from it. So they sent in the spies. I don't believe they were armed. They came into it. They were captured. Most of them were executed, because they came in as spies, And so you don't necessarily, an invasion and an attack doesn't necessarily mean they need to have conventional weapons. They may or they may not. I don't know if they do. But they're carrying a load of chemical weapons into the United States. Even if we were to legalize drugs, I am not for decriminalizing drugs. I am for legalizing them. And there is a distinction there. If you just decriminalize it, well then it's just whatever. But if you legalize it, you can regulate it like you do alcohol and tobacco. On alcohol labeling, we say how much alcohol, percentage of alcohol. Tobacco, I don't think we say so much, something like that, but there's still the idea, are there toxic chemicals in it or whatever else, So if you were to take some of these drugs and regulate the dosage, just how strong it is, and you only give out, and I would also wouldn't allow it to be sold on the streets. I would, for not so much like marijuana, but some of these stronger drugs, because I'm convinced that unless we do things like what we're doing now, getting serious about it, we're always going to be losing this, this war on drugs, which has never been a war. So long as we play by rules that level the playing field between the smuggler and drug pusher, etc., or we look back at the rules that were going on about maintaining prohibition. So long as we have these rules just going on, we don't, we're not going to win. We're not going to get rid of the drugs. So if we're talking serious hard drugs, I would set up regulated locations in which you come in and you take the drug at that location. You have a known dosage. You spend your time on the drugs locked up in a padded room kind of thing, and after a while you're let out. I would do it that way so that people can kill themselves over time, but it's not mystery drug kind of thing. Just oh, you're sick too? Sorry to hear that. So yeah, it's so if you look at these as chemical weapons coming into our country, and we're looking at that they're out at sea and all that other stuff. We've designated them terrorists, so we've designated them as an enemy that we're at war with after a fashion. Yeah, I don't know that there's a problem. So that's one of the things that's been going on in the U.S. And so I think those that are Zerder's hideout, expand ammunition and list. Gain searches for. Okay, storm the hideout, conscript them all. Reenlist some of it. We're going to just do reenlist. We don't need to spend the ammunition. We're good. We got a lot of. So let's head out to the battlefield here. Uh-oh, the enemy. Hey, Admiral Teague. Good to see you. And hello, Elizabeth. street buyers and addicts will never be able to withstand regulated purchases. Mental health is more a root cause, in my opinion. Okay, well, see, now that's a different element there, Elizabeth. You're defining the root element. Oh, there's a lot of various elements for drug addiction. And to pursue I don't know if cure is the right word, but pursue help with drug addiction very much can be good. One of the problems, and because I'm old, I remember it, I was there, back in the late 70s and early 80s, the government, through schools and other things, were putting out a lot of propaganda about, like, just how terrible marijuana is. And then when people would try it, kids or whoever, this ain't so bad. And it may, and I'm not going to get into it because I just don't have the knowledge. Is it as bad or worse or not as bad or whatever as alcohol? Now, people, oh, well, modern day marijuana is so much stronger than it used to be. Well, yeah, maybe. But again, you could talk about regulating dosage of the active chemicals in it, because you could easily make a marijuana cigarette or how much marijuana you put in brownies or however you do it, as how much you put in based upon how strong the marijuana is. Because I know they bred it to be different strengths and whatnot. And so once people found out that you're lying about one thing, well, you must be lying about these other things. And then people would try other drugs like PCP or other hallucinogenics that I don't know enough. And I've heard a lot of propaganda, but I've also heard people say that some of those aren't addictive. But you can go on to weird trips and think you can fly and jump off buildings. Yeah. And other people, that are under more medical condition type thing, controlled to have taken some of these drugs, and have had, and there's a lot of people are DMT, which is one of the active ingredients, I believe, in ayahuasca, which is a hallucinogenic drug for supposedly get in touch with other realms that may or may not exist. I definitely know people who believe that they do exist. I'm too much of a straight person to want to take them, but and so but they're all categorized and talked about as the same. So people stop trusting the information sources once they figure out whether it's true or not, that they've been lied to. And that's that's other elements. Again, I grew up in the 70s when I would say the majority of adults, not my family, my generally extended family, most didn't smoke. I remember at least one great grandfather who smoked. And one of my grandfathers did, but quit before I was born. But when I would say most adults smoked, to over most adults in America, even where it's generally legal to smoke, most adults in America do not smoke. So some of that may be restrictions on smoking in certain areas, but I actually think it's more education of the dangers of smoking, getting out there to youthful people, and that the information that they're giving is correct, that it does cause lung cancer and whatnot. So people have given up smoking because, excuse me, I'm really not feeling that bad. It's just I am getting over my cold. Still, in this talking is sort of making me sound worse. So
Yep, surviving the first time smoking weed absolutely destroyed the just say no. Absolutely, Admiral Teague. And hello, Beam Slam. And so there's a bot over on Twitch. So you have these, you know, government propaganda about it that, and propaganda doesn't necessarily make it untrue. Propaganda is a viewpoint information. Can be entirely lies, or it can be entirely truth, but it's just talking one side of an argument, if you will. Only bringing up the points that support your argument. And so, yeah, so I'm for, quite honestly, right now. I mean, if we could, effectively, and this may end up eventually getting rid of it or making it such a small thing. I'm for highly regulating drugs because I remember, again, I'm a straight-laced person and I have fear of addiction even when I was younger. So have I ever been high? Well, I've been to some rock concerts and I've been into some cafes that there's definitely a certain amount of contact, just probably minimum, shall we say, contact high from all of the pot being smoked. And, but I've never smoked a joint. So, yeah, I've, been around it and I'm sure slightly buzzed. But I've never smoked a joint. But we definitely see the levels of smoking go down. So I don't know why, with a good education type campaign that's truthful, we can't massively reduce, especially hard drugs, but even pot use, because we've reduced. And I don't know how much, but I think we've also reduced alcohol use in America. I don't have as good a feel for that because obviously you'd see a lot more people just, people didn't get a lot drunk that they would walk around the streets. I'm trying to remember, the 70s and the 80s. You didn't see a lot of drunks walking around the streets, shall we say. Yeah, sure, if you went to New Orleans and Bourbon Street or something like that, or, New Year's Eve or whatever, wherever you might be, and you would encounter drunk people. And I used to work as a bouncer, so of course I encountered lots of drunk people at the nightclub type bars that I was a bouncer at. So yeah, but those are obviously people self-selecting going into there, and just as a percentage of the population, you used to see people walking around always with cigarettes, and every office building you ever walked into, a certain percentage of the people smoked in that office building. So there was, ashtrays and whatnot all over the place, and they were constantly being used and cleaned out, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just gone. So I know smoking is radically less. I don't know alcohol, and as how widespread, not whether one person is drinking or having more alcohol, but how widespread alcohol is versus it used to be. But so I'm for highly regulating drugs. In many ways. Oh, my point is back like in high school, it was easier for someone to get some pot. I lived in a greater LA, than it was for them to score some alcohol, because alcohol was harder to get your hands on than pot, because the person selling pot was going to sell it illegally to whoever was there, where you had to go into a liquor store or some other store, you had to steal it, or you had to steal it from your parents or whatever to get a hold of alcohol as a teenager. It was definitely harder. Don't know cost wise whether it costs more. I don't remember the pricing on pot versus alcohol once you could get it. Who would sell it to you or whatever. Convince some 21 plus guy to go in and buy you some whatever, and his markup on it versus how much the pot would be. I don't know all that, but so I'm for highly regulating drugs and working like Elizabeth says to reduce down drug usage. That's how I would. And we can definitely look at mental health as being an element there, and not just like severely mentally damaged and not people, people who can't understand reality, but just people depressed in life that, and sometimes they're getting, Ritalin or other, I don't know, Valium back in the day for women or whatever, whether it's prescribed drugs or self-prescribed drugs. We can definitely look at the various causes of mental health issues, just stress, and using alcohol or pot or whatever as a stress relief. Well, and also look at, hey, people use exercise drugs as stress relief. The endorphins from like a runner or somebody who's doing a lot of strenuous exercise release endorphins into your body, and that will deal with stress relief kind of thing. And obviously, in my opinion, some people take, if some people want to be, performance athletes, fine. But most people who do sort of go down that route, that sort of get hooked into the endorphins, are sort of getting hooked on it. So we can definitely look at the various, stress reliefs of drugs and how to do it. And maybe the endorphins from running or other exercising, vigorous exercising, biking or whatever, can be an antidote to some of the drugs. So as a, kind of thing. Good point on drugs. Can't legislate people into being moral. I like red light district concepts better. Yes, exactly. I don't like the idea of street prostitutes. It's been years since I've seen a street prostitute. Again, in LA area, even driving down, just not even looking whether to pick anything up or anything, but again, fear of getting, an STD or worse, for street prostitute. But driving down certain streets, you can see the prostitutes. Okay, and I don't mean just in daily commute for me, for a period of my life. Right now, I think that in a way it's sort of gone away with just the internet. I mean, who are there still street prostitutes? Probably, but why not just get on the internet and do a paid hookup kind of thing like that, and that gets it off the streets to a degree. But whether you're meeting up in a hotel room or you're inviting them to your house or you're going to their thing, it's somewhat better, and so I am definitely somebody who could very much the idea of have a red light district or that kind of thing. And Der Alter Fritz is on the march. Yes. Yep, surviving the justice. Yeah, PCP is really destructive, and it shows you're really indifferent to being dangerously high, and you'll do anything. I've seen indirectly and more than a couple of people. Oh yeah, I don't know, and I know back from quote unquote documentaries, but obviously they have things. There was a back in the late '60s, the idea of some famous people taking PCP under supervision. And so, see, again, I don't know, something like, oh, did we stop a pipe for a pipe? I understand. Yeah. And so I'm not suggesting, thank you, Arna, for slaughtering the bot. I'm not suggesting a lot of these, whether it's a hallucinogenic or whether it's other sort of just mood altering type drugs, opiates or something like that we should just be selling these out, even in a liquor store, that you buy and walk away. I'm talking highly regulated kinds of things, as the harder the drug is, of the different types and conditions under, again, to take them, you may get locked in a room, maybe even locked in a room naked, or just with a, like whatever you want to call that, surgical gown kind, or not, or the kind of thing you wear in a hospital, just sort of some smock thing. You go in there and you take the drug, you pay for it, you take the drug, however long the prescribed time is, you're there, and they can come in and, if need be, hosed out the room before the next person comes in, kind of thing. I'm for highly regulating that kind of stuff, and it can definitely, how do you, I can kill people and will kill people. Recreational use, I really don't factor in, just the fentanyl opiate addicts who will do anything for the next high. It is really bad in Lithuania, and it is awful in U.S. Portland, where it is regulated. Well, a cousin of mine. Well, I had another cousin who did get sort of hooked on drugs for a while. I mean, he's, to my knowledge, been off for many years. Another cousin of mine who did get hooked on opioids when he fell and shattered his leg in multiple places, and because of the pain, it was prescribed opioids, and I don't think he ever was like getting drugs on the street or anything like that. He was living in a different state at the time, and I was intermittently in contact with him, but he said it was really tough getting off of it, and he wanted to. He got hooked on it because, through medical use, if you will, OxyContin or whatever it was. Got hooked on it, being prescribed it, and then had to fight getting off the hook. And I don't think he was, one of the kind of guys that was doing anything for drugs. He was addicted and had to fight that, really fight that addiction off, kind of thing. So, even prescribed use, proper use, shall we say, of something like an opioid can get you hooked. And it can be, I like the purge room concept, for lack of a better term. Yes, purge room. Yes, that kind of thing. And I'm not advocating that this should be something everybody should try or everybody do. It's just either, because we're starting at point today, not point what we should have done back in 1960 something or 1980 something or whatever. We're starting at point today. And so we have addicts. So we need to, like we got rid of a lot of the gangs. I mean, there's obviously still, traditional mafia gangsters out there, but they were controlling so much through the alcohol business that they were running. They've lessened and lessened their control here in America. I mean, there's still a real factor, especially in certain areas, but it's less than it used to be. So we will destroy, continue to fight the illegal drug trade. I'm not, this is also part of the thing is I'm not for deregulating or decriminalizing. No, it still be as big a crime as it is today to sell drugs out on the street, if you will, or delivered by an Uber driver or whatever. Just to randomly sell drugs to people, whether it's adults or children, keep it as illegal as it is right now. But establish, and yes, it could be big pharma, big drug, establish the idea of regulated, monitored, both distribution chains for the drugs themselves, as well as, and I would keep it separate from doctors' offices, because that's one of the problems with assisted suicide, is that the people that are involved are also medical professional types, and I want my medical people to do everything to keep that patient alive and well. And whether we think it's good or bad for society to allow for assisted suicides, Canada's been doing a lot of those. A lot. Hey, you're sick? Well, why don't you just see about killing yourself? I know it's just a cold, but come on, you could just kill yourself. And I'm not joking by too much here for Canada, quite honestly. And whether you think it's good or not, I definitely don't want the medical profession, a doctor, anybody who gets a doctor's degree, to be anywhere near the suicide thing. You can have an entirely different, if you as a society, people can kill themselves whenever they want to jump off a bridge or something, obviously. But if you as a society decide that you want to have assisted, generally, I guess the idea of trying to be painless, a suicide. And I definitely understand people who truly believe they're terminal, and they probably are. I mean, we're all going to die someday, but are particularly terminal, and that are particularly going through lots and lots of pain. I get why they might want to. Okay, I get that. Now we have to decide as a society, how do we do that? I want to keep doctors 100 miles away from that whole decision tree, that whole decision proposition. I don't want doctors, well, quality of life and how, the age and how long much, it'd probably be better if I just convince this patient to kill themselves. Now, this other patient I want to save because whatever reasons, now I don't want my doctors, my nurses, any of my medical staff, their whole thing should be extend the life as good a conditions as you can, as well as you can be for as long as you can be. And I want that whole industry from start to finish to be focused on that. I want to, and corporate ownership and anything else, I want it to be entirely different, whether it was for assisted suicide or for other drug use, kind of thing. So I don't want one pharmaceutical company doing, different tracks. No. It needs to be entirely separate. You keep a very strong wall between, if you're gonna be trying to have heroin rooms and trying to process heroin to a as safe as it can be to a particular dosage. I don't want you to also be making aspirin, or other pain relievers. No. It's entirely different companies, entirely, not just sort of on fiction with a holding company. No, just up and down, just big bright wall between things like that. It's just sort of the clinical nature, shall we say, is the only thing similar between the two. Not you don't have, it's like a nurse. Oh yeah, well, for a few years I worked in this drug taking place, but then I got this better job at a hospital. No, you work in the drug stuff. You're never going to work in a hospital. So you can give up your career as a medical person and lose any and all medical licenses and go work at a purge room facility or something like that. Fine, but you're never coming back the other way. I want to keep it very, very, very bright line between the two. Demand is the biggest driving factor in the drug trades, but fighting the demand on something like that is like punching ghosts. Well, no, Elizabeth. Sorry, it's not. I think we need to, in society, have mechanisms with appeals and everything else for deeming someone to be somebody that we're going to force to have mental health treatments, at some level for some period of time. We used to do this until the 80s, institutionalize somebody. But have reviews, so it isn't just some person, could be male or female, wanting to get out of a marriage. Well, I'm just going to claim they're crazy and get them institutionalized and get rid of them that way. No, you got to go through a whole process. And similarly, if we find that somebody is out there and we can, for this, you can obviously empirically test somebody, that if they're testing positive for drugs, we lock them up. Not necessarily into a prison, but it can be, into a facility that they're going to, and you could do 2 tracks of this, and you can always try to convince them to one track or the other, but one track to try to get them sober, the other track, and maybe even force them to be sober for, long enough to get over it and get out, but then they can then make the choice and have the availability of a center to go in and get your drugs, purge room, or for something like marijuana or whatever. Again, I'm not the best person. You go in and buy it at like a liquor store, that's highly regulated. You got to see IDs and and all that kind of stuff. But however you do it, and you continue high punishments for the people that just sell it out on the streets, as well as people along that whole chain of supply, kill the drug boats, that kind of stuff. So that, and we, people talk about like Singapore. Well, Singapore is just a city-state, and they can kill their way out of drug, they can keep drugs from being smuggled into Singapore mostly, by making it, a death sentence. But America's just too big. We can't watch all of our borders anyways, etc. It's just too big of an area. We're not just one little island that we're talking about to keep drug free. Um, so we can, and at some point over time, especially, and we're not looking at least I'm not looking at this as a 1 year or 5 year plan. I'm looking at this as a 20, 30, 40 year plan. So a person born today, if we started the idea of clinical, we'll call them clinical, places to take certain drugs, and or just regulating like the pot industry as if it were, the tobacco or the, alcohol industry. If we were just regulating those like that, yeah, sure, people buy moonshine. And people buy or make, um, bathtub wine, if you will. But there really isn't an industry in either one of those things. It's people are buying, alcohol that's coming at it. They know what proof it is. They know who manufactured it. It's all labeled. Or they're buying cigarettes that are coming from whatever cigarette companies, Camel or Marlboro or whoever. Um, and it's all regulated. Very few people are buying just literal loose tobacco, that somebody grew in their backyard. And very few people are buying moonshine. So I don't know why, after a long period of time, we would presume drug dealers, if you will, because the whole pipeline. Because if you could have a marijuana farm, that you may have to throw up some fences and a few other things around it more than you do a regular wheat field. But if you're doing that and you're selling into a pipeline and regulated pipeline of, companies like Marlboro or whoever that are making your marijuana cigarettes, and then you make serious punishments, prison terms, death penalties, whatever, for the illegal track, most people will just go, hey, I can grow marijuana and sell it to these companies. Yeah, it's maybe twice as much to sell it to some, drug pusher, dealer, cartel, whatever. But why? I just grow twice as much of it and I'll make the same amount of money. And I don't have the penalty or the possibility of going to prison. So why not just, at some point the risk reward analysis is it's just better to go with the system. And so, yeah, there will definitely be a transition. Let's see what Admiral Teague's saying. Prohibition was ignored by most local cops and ended up undermining the concept of simply obeying the law. Absolutely, that is, that is very much a belief that I have, that I've come to, and we can definitely look at, like here in America, the illegal alien situation in which there are sanctuary cities or towns or whatever that officially we're breaking the law policies. I don't think we should have laws. Now, it's one thing, speeding laws, in most areas, unless they're really trying to run a speed trap, if you're going less than 10 miles an hour over the speed limit and the traffic flows, you're not weaving in and out of traffic, the traffic is just flowing. Most even, highway patrol cops or other, they don't pull you over for it, okay? It's if you're going really fast or you're driving really dangerous. So it's not that we're not enforcing speed laws. It's just known that, okay, yeah, if you're floating around near the speed limit, or even if you're sort of pegging yourself, at 75 in a 65 mile an hour zone, and you see a motorcycle cop over there on the side, you may take your foot off the accelerator or something, but he's not going to come and give you a ticket, because if he waits just 20 minutes more or something, he's going to get somebody who's blowing past it at a lot faster. So yeah, you risk, at something near 10 miles an hour over the speed limit, you're risking a ticket, but it's sort of understood, but you can't drive 20 or 30 miles an hour or faster. And especially in some rural towns like where I am, when they post a 15 mile an hour speed limit near a school, they mean it. they're not joking around about that. It's not like, oh hey, yeah, you can cruise faster, or especially, and often the signs say when children are present. So if when it's not children aren't present, it's 35 or something. So when there aren't a significant number of children on the sidewalk and trying to make crossing the street, you can drive at 35 miles an hour in the neighborhood. But once the children, schools coming, getting into session or letting out or lunch period or whatever it is, you go very slow, and they're very serious about it. And another area which I'm not going to say that, and it does vary in the United States for age of consent. In some states it's 16, and I don't know which ones. I grew up in an 18 age of consent. I think consent laws either need to be enforced, age of consent, or they need to be adjusted and enforced. And, whether that should be 16 or whether that should be 18 or should it be 21. And we have to take it, or should it be down at 14? I don't, I'm not the person to make that decision. And it's obviously something I think the society should make that decision. But I really think we should enforce it to a point of even if the two participants are both underage. They should both be going to, maybe not jail, but going to some of these boot camps or whatever, that kind of thing where, discipline boot camps or some sort of real punishment to really sort of like go, no, don't do this until you're over a certain age. But take the reality of hormones and whatnot into effect with it, and make people enforce the laws you have, and if the laws you have don't make sense for your current society, we're no longer in the 1950s. People no longer fear, no longer they're trying to be a virgin when they get married, and so at what age do you set the age of consent? And then, do that and enforce that. So yes, prohibition was a badly handled situation. And that's what sort of changed me on the drug. And yes, I know Ken Burns is getting a lot of criticism for his latest, and I have not seen it, his latest documentary on the American Revolution. But his documentary on prohibition, or series, is influenced my thinking. It's not that I think drugs are any less dangerous or they shouldn't be taken or whatever. No, it's how do we deal with this? And looking at the modern day alcohol situation is definitely influencing in that. I don't know if we're going to win this. This is going to be a tough fight. They're bigger than us. And they've got cannons. So I want to highly regulate it and not just like legalize it or decriminalize it. I want to regulate it and put some teeth to those regulations. And then, as sort of Elizabeth brought up, really work on the whole root causes and have I don't know if you want to call them programs or good, if you will, strategies to help people get off of drugs, alcohol, tobacco, whatever. Not just some state propaganda, but actual programs to help people get off of it. So it's not like we're just giving up and letting drugs be just available. We're looking at least I'm looking at the idea as that. I was looking at this again after playing Grand Tactician, wishing the game wasn't so busted. Yeah, I've not played Grand Tactician. I have heard of it. Hello, Snuffy McGee. And we're playing here the latest update version of this game that came out, I think, a week or so ago. But about a week ago. Okay, so Come up here. Let's go. Try to use these hedges here to be a bit of a cover. Don't like the terrain we're in. I think we could get to the hill before they do, but I don't know that that's going to be a good idea. So we're going to come up here and sort of refuse the right flank. And we're going to use our cavalry to go around their rear. Addicts don't want to go into programs even if they do relapse after treatment. Well, like I say, you don't necessarily give them a choice. And I'm not talking about the addict. Well, two things. One, again, if you still fight the illegal drug trade. See what happens to those cannons. The one thing I'm not very satisfied in this game is cannons. Is how they work. But I don't know. So you still maintain punishment for those in the illegal drug trade. So you try to make most people's access to drugs to be highly regulated. And the addict can get their drugs through the highly regulated source. They can still get their drugs. You have the programs, if you will, to try to help them off the drugs. And I don't know, you can have, and this is again from the American perspective, I hate national programs because we're too big and it's one size fits all just doesn't work for us. But also the idea that if we have 50 different programs and run by, and it can be a combination of programs, not in one area. It doesn't have to be just a program. We're going to put you right in here so your command radius will affect some of these units here. But you have 50 different, I know we got territories and whatever, but you get the different states to implement different programs, and then you compare notes over time to see what's working, what isn't working, and all that kind of fun things too. But you make it so that it's difficult to get drugs through the illegal sources, enough that you're working on making the illegal sources dry up, and those that for whatever reason are going to continue down it, even with that. And again, if you're talking, like if drunk drivers, I think they should be, heavily prosecuted. That doesn't mean drunks should be heavily prosecuted as drunk drivers. And if you get people that are not just acting irresponsibly, but acting too dangerous to whatever, you force them into programs. you know, through the court system. It's not just random kind of things. So, like talking, you know, saying earlier, you know, sometimes you force people into mental institutions. Whether there may also be drugs as a partial cause for the mental instabilities. The same developer, yeah. Yeah. To me, it's more just an ignorance on Grand Technician than thinking it's good or bad. I guess I come to these guys. I didn't know if I should go after the artillery in their rear. It is hurting me a bit. So yeah, I'm all for killing the drug boats because I consider them terrorists who are bringing in chemical weapons. And I think treating them as if it's a criminality problem in a domestic legal sense is not going to be successful. I think we're going to have you. They're retreating and may break here very quickly. These guys in the rear. Retreating unit like this could theoretically get there. Oh, well, they're broken now. They just taken too many casualties. This game does not seem to have friendly fire. Well, no, they held their fire here, but they didn't. I don't know. Maybe it was just this. They were still loading here and they had loaded there. You're going to deal with these guys. They have now decided. Now these guys are getting their morale back. So what we're going to do is we're going to move up like this. Keep pressure on these units. Society needs to protect itself. Whether that's from the drunk driver, but also, and I know in a libertarian sense, and I'm not fighting against the idea of personal liberty by any means. That's why I am saying, instead of just criminalizing it or whatever, allow, even though it's detrimental, allow the drug user to have the ability to use drugs. But we also need to do what we can, that we've invested in these people, how to maintain that investment, because we've seen this unit come all the way back. Fight. Any of these others could. What do you do about persistent illegal trade like the black market weed that flourishes because it's cheaper and more people are on weed? Well, again, folk, like I said, you continue the law enforcement, especially domestically within the United States, for any of these black markets. And sure, somebody can grow pot in their backyard and sell it to the neighbor kids. But I would say, and I'm sure I'm wrong, but I don't know how far wrong, probably 90% of people who regularly drink alcohol only drink alcohol through approved sources, meaning not moonshine, not some sort of, now some people are just, again, they just within their family or whatever, make wine, say bathtub, but whatever, go through a process of, making small batches of wine or mead or whatever, in some traditional way. So some people will make their own alcohol products like that. But I would say 90+% of people who routinely have alcohol buy it through approved, sources. And if there's an approved path for whatever drugs are out there, it could be new things created at any time, but, go back to the pot farmer. If you do everything through the legal registered process, you can make a profit. However big a profit it is, I don't know, but you can make a profit. Or if you do it through the illegal way, you could go to prison. And you do the, California very smartly set up a 3 strikes law, meaning if you commit 3 felonies, not like 3 felonies in a day, but go get convicted of 1 or more felonies at a time, go serve your time, you leave, you get convicted again of a felony, and on the 3rd time you're going through the system, you were in for life. Well, this happened at the tail end of Republican actually winning election in California, because they used to win elections in California. There was also it would swing back and forth, but the Republicans, I think, could win governorships more often than Democrats. It was Reagan who killed that by his amnesty that flooded the amount of, obviously, particularly Mexicans, but California with a lot of new legal voters that all voted Democrats. So that killed it. But you had that law come in that has not been repealed yet, that you still had governors appointing or electing judges. At certain levels they're appointed within California, at certain levels they're elected. Having leftist judges, as well as legislators who don't want to build more prisons, again, ideological. So you had overcrowding in prisons, because how stupid are you? Alcohol is so expensive now, it is a lifestyle flex. Well, yeah, but how much, and you don't want to price it to a point that people can't afford it, because then that again just encourages too much of a black market. But, if you're a criminal and you've gone through 2 series of felony convictions, and the next time you get caught committing a felony and get convicted of it, you're going to prison for life. Why the hell didn't you just move out of California? because this law doesn't, then maybe everywhere could institute three strikes laws, which they haven't. I think very, very few states, if any others, ever have. But judges hate it, and they often will get people to both the district attorney and the judges and everybody else will get somebody, well, hey, dude, you're going to go to prison for life if you get convicted. But hey, if you just plead to this misdemeanor and accept that, we won't charge you with a felony. You go away for a few years and you'll be out. So there's playing with all these games. But if you talk about the idea that, and you enforce a three strikes law, not just on the drug trade, but just generally speaking on felonies, that eventually you'll lock these people up. And the people that, and you mean it, for life, without parole, just you're in there for life, you're not getting out. You might as well go on a Grand Theft Auto murder spree trying to get out of it, because if you're ever caught again, you're done for prison. And especially if you're in a state that doesn't execute people, well, hell, if you're caught, you're caught. There's not like they can decide to up it to, to the death penalty. And I do believe in the death penalty, and I believe in the death penalty mostly should be for the most heinous of crimes, and with very, very, very clear evidence. I know nowadays with the AI we can fake all kinds of video evidence and whatnot, but yeah, it needs to be not just, hey, there were two people in the room, one of them died. We don't have anything more than that. Now, you may have a lot of backstory and you may have a lot of other real knowledge, but you really don't know what happened in that room. You have one person's testimony, hey, he attacked me, but he's in a wheelchair and he can hardly move. Yeah, but he attacked me. Obviously you could draw up things that your claim of self-defense or whatever might be sounding ridiculous, but I was going to commit suicide, but he drank the poison instead, or what, So, that for the death penalty, I would make it not life in prison, not 20 years to life, not, some harsh crime. I'm talking about the actual death penalty. Make it really, really, really clear that the person is both guilty and it's a particularly heinous crime, because even if it's just killing somebody, well, then if they get a hostage and they're trying to negotiate out, well, it doesn't matter. You're already going to get me for killing this other person. So if you want to save this person, get me a plane to Cuba or whatever, kind of bullshit it may be, but the idea that they'll see that they have nothing to lose. But make it so that that they can always sort of try to negotiate them out of a hostage taking situation with just life in prison, or just 20 years or 30 years in prison or something like that. So, give them some negotiating room, not just death penalty for murder. It's got to be particularly heinous or something that can be a threat. Like, hey, if you kill your hostage, that's an automatic death penalty or something like that. That we could, talk about. So you do that and you'll get a lot of people out of the idea of a drug trade, because it'll just be better to do it legally, and it'll be, and again, it's got to be priced in a way that might be less than criminal drugs, because especially that's the ultimate idea, is that if there's a legal pipeline that's bringing in drugs, because you're going to look at how cheap gasoline is, and especially if you look at the whole, not just drilling it out of the ground, drilling down and getting out of the ground, but the whole refining and transporting and into the levels of safety elements. It's still dangerous, but safety elements around a gasoline pump, and how cheap that gallon of gas is. And if you think about, not that, and I know prices are coming down, but even at like a couple dollars a gallon with our general value of the dollar, how cheap all of that gasoline is per gallon, actually. I don't know why drugs are going to be so expensive, because they'll be able to get the prices down, still with the regulation. And it might still be cheaper through the illegal pipeline, but if it's just so much easier to go through the legal pipeline, people who can will. And if the market dries up because 90% or 75% or whatever people are going through the legal process to get their drugs, there won't be enough customers that'll make it worthwhile, for at least most cases in most instances, to make the idea of being an illegal drug person somewhere along the pipeline worth it. So it'll dry up. It won't go 100%, but it will dry up heavily. Let's see. It's $9 for a tap beer in Queens. It's $17 in Manhattan. Yeah, but again, I've worked in bars for years as a bouncer. It's always cheaper to get your can of beer somewhere than it is to buy the beer. Now, we often, I worked at places that would, particularly Taco Tuesday. I worked at, because we used to have those. And it used to be $1 per taco. Pretty damn good tacos. My very good friend, he was more of a friend than a boss, but he was also a boss at the job for me, negotiated with one of the places that we worked at routinely. We got all the free tacos we could eat on premises. The security staff did. That was so we didn't have to pay for the tacos. But you couldn't take extra home or something. You could have whatever you ate there. And you also got free soft drinks while you worked. No alcohol. But while you worked, you got free drinks, free tacos. But they would sell some cheap beers that were just in the bottle or whatever. But that was just one particular, Tecate or whatever, one particular brand of beer they were getting cheap and selling it only on Tuesdays, only during Taco Tuesday, which was like a 4-hour period that they'd have the tacos, that they'd have the cheap beer. Otherwise, the beers are always more in bars than they are at the store. You're paying for the bar to run. It's not just paying for, how much it costs to, $10,000 per bottle of Romane Conti. Well, yeah, now that is just a flex. I don't know if it's really that much better than whatever else, but just $10,000 for something really is more of a flex. There's always going to be some super expensive rich folk. Yes, of course. The problem is the losers who want to self-delete by cop. Well, yeah, you look, nothing, and again, I'm talking about we're fighting, in society over, being treated like cogs and people fighting over the formula, communism, capitalism, democracy, authoritarian, whatever, and I'm not here advocating any particular program or any particular formula. Nothing's going to work 100%. I'm not saying we do X, Y, or Z and it'll be, whatever problem we're talking about in society is going to go away 100%. I'm talking about mitigating it, making it less of a problem, making, looking at this, one of the things that gets people going is depression, and it's unemployment, and people get depressed because of being unemployed, get addicted to substances, could be alcohol, could be something legal, but get to where they are no longer employable even if there is a job. So, we can talk about the lack of jobs or whatever, and we can talk about immigration and flooding in cheap labor, and we can talk about all kinds of stuff like that. But, and like my cousin who got hooked on OxyContin or whatever, just again for taking prescribed medicine, and had to fight his way off the addiction. It wasn't for depression. He had a good job working for a large oil company in the computer field, but large oil company. Nice family, nice house, nice everything. It just, shattered his leg in, multiple broken bits, and it was in a lot of pain for considerable time while it was healing, and so taking a lot of opiates that got him hooked, and he got off of it. And I don't think he's ever going to backslide. It just, got hooked for the time. And he's, not a druggie or whatever. So yeah, there's always going to be problems. We're always going to, look at, self-deletion by cop. Yes. There's always going to be these things out there. But I'm looking at major problems and going, we need to do something different. Our bouncer has genius level recall of history and can name most after the French and the German pre-parliament, right? Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Hey, remember, AOC used to be a bartender. Hey, we can move up. Pre-war, yes, I get that. Gamer is not at genius level yet. He's a young bouncer and still crystal intelligent increase with age. Yes. Oh, yes. Hey, once in a while, you want a bouncer who can think? And also, I know some of you probably watched various TV shows. I was a bouncer in Orange County. Mostly with cities with a beach in the name, like Huntington Beach or Newport Beach. Oh, people would get drunk and there'd be fights. Trust me, there was those. And we had to deal with it all. But it wasn't quite like I've known other bouncers who some were bouncing back east and some were bouncing, in whether it's Chicago or New York or Boston or something, and others who were bouncing in more LA type areas that we're not winning this here. Okay, they're retreating off. Okay, we're going to keep pushing up here. I'm going to reform here. Let's come and form like that. You're going to continue that fight. So as bouncers go, it wasn't the most harsh environment. Okay, these guys are somewhat reformed. Let's move them up here. I don't know how much I want to risk them in combat. Dude, I don't know here, I like this game, but you don't put your artillery behind the woods and try to shoot through the woods. It just doesn't work. Hey guys, kill these guys. You're not winning. You need to win. It's fired at these guys. Move up. Oh, okay, so I just noticed we're getting some cover through here. Okay, so these woods are, but the AI or whatever is not doing well. Okay. You guys come up here to these guys' flank. Maybe we can charge them in the rear here again. I think this is the hardest battle I've fought with this game so far, that I've not just been kicking its butt. Okay, they've shattered, so they've lost their artillery. So let's keep pushing. Don't let them a chance to get too comfortable here. I read the first, I've seen the original Dune movie, and I've seen a couple of the remakes. The original is still my favorite Dune. Okay, they've just fired. Charge them. And you're coming in on their flank, and they've just fired, so they're not going to be able to shoot at you. So hopefully... Okay, we do have a victory here. Wow. The Dune books look very much at personal loyalties, as opposed to, you're fighting for the house. You're not fighting for communism or capitalism or democracy or some other formula. And you're also, at least I would say, and there is a bit of a fight struggle within it, because some of the people are sort of genetically engineered, but acknowledge that not everyone's the same. Not everyone's can be shaped into a cog to fit in any place, and are definitely influenced by Marxism, but it goes pre-Marx and its other elements. The idea of that we're all the same, we're all equal. We're not. We're not all the same, we're not all equal. There are elites. Okay? It may not be as apparent as it was in the Middle Ages, in which somebody was bigger, stronger, and spent a big chunk of their life learning how to swing a sword, and got enough money or resources or whatever together to have, armor. Because armor and a sword are expensive. Hey, a stick with a metal point on it, a spear, is cheap compared to a sword. A proper sword. Not just a big metal knife, but a properly made sword. And even chainmail armor back in the day, it was expensive. And then a bit later, moving in the idea of who could read and write compared to, and I mean literate, not just, oh, hey, they recognize a few words, It's like going to a foreign country and recognizing a stop sign or whatever. And you may be able to even, sound out the letters or something. But think of one of our Western European types here going into Russia or some other Cyrillic alphabetic language, so that they're no longer using the Roman language. Going to Greece or someplace like that, and so having an entirely different alphabet or somewhat different alphabet, we can very quickly learn. Even if it isn't an octagonal red sign that we see that it means stop, but we can quickly identify. Even if some of the basic parameters change, and it's just a sign that has the word stop in it. Once you've learn to recognize that sign, you may even know what that alphabet sort of stands for, so that you can identify, just not a stop sign on the road, but just somebody putting up a sign on their property or something that says stop or whatever that you just had made. You could recognize it. I mean, actual literate people who can read sentences and could read a book. When you have that big a divide, it's clear who's read books, multiple books, who've learned things, versus those who may know farming and have an encyclopedia knowledge of farming in this environment here, whatever the here is, and they know all of it, and they can know just by looking around. Are birds a problem? They eating too much of your crops, and how to deal with that. And they have, a mind full of knowledge, but outside of well, we defeated a much bigger army here. Um, outside of sort of knowledge on what you're doing there, you don't want Farmer John to be your elite. Sure, yeah, he may be, an older guy who really knows and teaches the younger people about farming, but that doesn't mean you want him to deal with governance, to deal with the justice system. Yeah, he may have a good sense of fairness, and as he understands, fairness in the community, is come up with somewhat just things, but you really don't want him to be a proper judge or even a hated lawyer. You want you want somebody who has that. So it's clearer then who are the elites and who aren't the elites. Now, in the Western world, and I say it that way because it is sort of, the elites have been very much, in the post-World War II sense. Pre-World War II, it's different, but post-World War II sense, they've had this sort of liberal democratic democracy kind of viewpoint, and anything that variances from that, whether it's communism or fascism or whatever, or theocracy, is inherently wrong just because it's not our liberal democratic system. So our elites have really come to a been ideologically captured, and they are also, we can look at them very much as, and they were back in this period as well, seeing a French elite would have more in common with a Prussian elite. They probably both spoke French. There's only those English people that hardly spoke French. In Austria, the elites all spoke French. They'd only speak like German to their servants or the common folk when they had to deal with them. But they spoke French to each other. But they would have more in common with each other than they would necessarily have with the lower classes. There's always an element of that, because elites at the top are going to recognize each other by not necessarily like secret handshakes or passwords, but just by having similar attitudes, similar education and whatnot. So I think our internationalism, as we've sort of post World War II had it, is coming to an end. But that doesn't mean that everyone's equal. No, we need elites. You need people. Humanity is a pyramid, okay, people? It is. Now, it's not necessarily one pyramid, one world government or whatever. It can be multiple pyramids out there, but it's not a flat line. We're not all level. That's what I hate levelism. Because that's a period before this period, the 18th century, more 16th, 17th century. But you also go back and find it in the Middle Ages. And sometimes it's communist, but mostly it's just leveling. Meaning that there should be no elites. We should all be equal. We should all, have the equal size farm. Not necessarily have communism in the sense of communal ownership of the means of production. No, each person had their own farm or their own shoemaking industry, and especially, in a pre-industrialized world. The blacksmith, he owns his smithy. It shouldn't be owned by some landlord or some elite. I hate leveling. Leveling is terrible. Society is not level. Humanity is a pyramid, and if we really look at it, it's an intricate pyramid, overlapping pyramid, because you can have various pyramids at different levels within it and around it, that with different, especially in the more modern world, various technological specialties. You can no longer have an Isaac Newton or somebody who can accumulate virtually all knowledge available to people. It's just too much knowledge to get into any one person's head in a lifetime. Even whether our brains could handle all that knowledge is another question. But we're not, to again mentioning Dune, we're not back to human computers. Damn, the DeLorean was fueled and ready to go. Okay, so yes. So we need elites. Now we also need elites that are in touch with reality, and that's, I would say, the constructs coming out of the 20th century are ideological. Again, they've been sold on the idea that if you just get the right formula, whether you're a communist elite or a capitalist elite or whatever types of elites. So I'm an elitist. I'm not saying that just because 500 years ago somebody got a title that they're somehow better than me. I have known, and a few that I have been away from Britain for a long time, but a few that I would call friend, and I think they would call me. Meaning, I spent the night and had open invitations to stay at their house. So this wasn't just somebody that I saw and talked to for 5 minutes. Just short periods of time. I would stay at their house. Elites in Britain, they very much, and so some of the ones I met casually, some of the ones that were my friend, they very much had a sense of duty, a sense of responsibility to society. One of them I knew, she was a lady, not because of who she married, but she earned that title. She was knighted for her activities during World War II, which included jumping out of an airplane into Yugoslavia during World War II. A woman from London who went and I mean, she's passed now. I mean, years ago. And unfortunately, she was one of the ones that I had an open invitation to stay at her house. And it wasn't some huge, big, grand house, though I've known a few that have lived in, that type of houses too. But, it was a nice size house, multiple bedrooms and all that kind of stuff, up in the countryside. But, she earned her knighthood for, like I said, going into Yugoslavia. But this was during the breakup of Yugoslavia, and unfortunately, she was so emotionally wrecked over it. I could talk to her things, about, to some degree, our shared ancestry of Scottish things, and again, 1745 and the Scottish motif that I use here. She could talk about all that stuff just fine, but try to talk to her about either her experiences in World War II or what she knew about Yugoslavia. That breakup, not just that Yugoslavia was breaking up, but the genocide is a harsh term. It's sort of, ethnic cleansing would be better. They weren't trying to kill all of the Serbs or all of the Croats or whatever. It was just kill the ones that were, in our territory or something like that. Or, in trying to drive the rest of the ones out. That was just really too emotional. So she just really didn't want to talk about that. And unfortunately, I never really got to talk about her experiences going in during World War II, because she was really breaking up over it, and I did not want to push her on that at all. Though I would have been fascinated to hear the stories. But yeah, so they had very much a caretaker attitude to various things in Britain. And so I really respected these elites that I knew. Not that they were flawless or anything like that. Not that they were better than me or whatever. But they had a sense that when some of their ancestors, You know, I don't know if you know the artist Copley, but they had portraits by Copley. Um, you know that although they owned them, they were in the National Gallery and things like that. So you know, so these people in Britain, you know, yes, however many hundreds of years ago they achieved some titles, and they're still around with that. But you need a society that is not too rigid, that people can move up and down the ladder of the elites. And it's not just social, you know, social status, though that is an element to it. We need elites. And they need to have special privileges. And I'm using that term deliberately. Because if they abuse things, they lose their privileges. It's not necessarily, like I said, special rights. It's special privileges. And if they, and we can have, you can have elites in all kinds of areas. You know, you can have elites in scientific development, or in computer programming, or in chip development, or whatever. You know, that do have a certain amount of not just, oh, hey, I'm smart, that I'm, you know, writing stuff on a chalkboard or a modern day tablet that is coming up with some new, you know, chemical formula or whatever, but being able to lead teams. You know, again, it's pyramidal. It's, you know, you don't leave, you know, your basic level, which can be like a university doctorate. You know, you don't get your doctorate, you know, in whatever field, whether it's computer science or in chemistry or whatever, or in philosophy or in government or whatever. You don't leave university and then you're at the top of your pyramid. No. Now, if you have a doctorate in somebody and you're talking to people, or you're organizing up people that are involved in it, but have a, you know, a high school education in that field, yeah, you're an elite to those. Again, this is why I say it's not just a pyramid. It's shaped this way. But the day you leave, you know, university, doesn't mean that you should lead teams, even if you're some, you know, genius savant on whatever sort of topic you may be. You need to get that experience. You need to deal with people with inside your pyramid, people outside your pyramid, or you're part of other people's pyramids. You know, you need to move up or down through time through the pyramid. So human society is pyramidal, not level, not flat. And it isn't just, oh, hey, everybody got together in a room, you know, for whatever, and we voted Bob here to be our representative, but we're all equal, and we're all going to vote on everything, but go to the next meeting, it's Bob, or Bob's our spokesperson. No, it's not we're all equal or we're all the same. We're pyramidal. Why is Bob being elected? Is he smarter than everybody else in the room? Maybe. Or maybe he's just more socially adept. And it could be a bunch of people that are, you know, all socially adept, but somebody who's slightly more at motivating people, not by, oh, hey, I'm in charge, or, oh, hey, I'm paying your salary, you do what I say, but maybe just motivating people to do what either he wants or what he thinks is good for fill in the blank, society, the group that he's dealing with, whatever, you know. He has better skills than the other people in the room. You know, they could all be former cruise directors, you know, people organizing events on cruises. But one of those people, you know, which are, you know, to get people to, you know, play shuffleboard or do whatever, camp counselors and people like, you know, that have a lot of skills at in a voluntary sense, getting people to do things well together. You know, there's always going to be somebody better, more, or the most in the room. You know, maybe not. There's always, you know, there's somebody going to be the best in the room at the time. So we are pyramidal. Now, I'm not suggesting that we're an ant colony or a beehive, or we even look to Asia, which is very, very much words slipped away. Collectivists. They're obviously not ant hives or beehives, but they're much more of a collectivist society than the West. I still think the West is the best, not just because it rhymes, but it is the best society out there, in societal organization. But we need to, we need to have elites that, whether it's in true government, but in whatever fields, that governs well, that, has leadership, that brings the people along with them, not just, hey, I'm in charge, and if you don't do what I say, Boris over there is going to shoot you. It's like a commissar kind of thing. No, it's so and we need to get rid of this myth of equality. Yeah, we can have to a certain degree equality before the law, but we have to, give police officers a bit more leeway. Like, hey, they get to speed, but we have to presume that the reasons. Now, sometimes something I heard, some police officer was being charged because he was chasing somebody, and that somebody ran into somebody else. So the police officer has been convicted of some crime because he was chasing, in his car, and the person, runs over somebody in a crosswalk or something. I don't remember what it was, but second or third order effects from chasing. Oh, the police officer should just backed off and let the criminal go because all he did was, point a gun at somebody and steal some cash. He didn't actually hurt anybody until the police officer chased him, and he then, kills somebody else. So the police officer no, we have to, now that doesn't mean that the police officer gets to be a local thug or criminally incompetent or whatever. No, he needs to have consequences to his actions. But we have to be a bit more forgiving, a bit more leeway, because every day, shall we say, he goes in and deals with a domestic violence issue. Not just, oh, it's the man attacking the woman. No, it could be whatever, And so every day he's sorting out that situation, and sometimes he's going to get it wrong. Now the question is, if he gets it too far wrong, well, he should, even if he's been a great police officer, he should never be a police officer again, because there needs to be consequences to your action. And if he gets it very, very wrong, maybe he should go to prison. Derek Chauvin, who just restrained a person who took too much drugs, but then had the BLM summer, should not be in prison for his restraining. It looked really bad on that camera, but once you start getting, oh, he had taken a lot of drugs, and oh, hey, it wasn't his knee on his neck or whatever that was keeping him from breathing. It was the drugs keeping him from breathing. So, yeah, it looked very bad at first look. And so, but yes, there are, and I'm not just talking cops that go down a criminal path. I'm talking about cops who get out of control or whatever and just go too far. Yes, some of them should go to prison. Not just because, oh, somebody, was a threat, so they pull out a gun and they shoot, and the bullet could go right through a person, or could miss and again kill an entirely innocent bystander. No, that's not a reason to put him to prison. But if we find him pulling out a gun because it's a traffic stop, because he's afraid for his life, oh, I was afraid for my life, so I pulled out the gun. And then the loud noise goes off, so he pulls the trigger because he thinks no, that, if you're not willing to go, now if you have, you pull up the, in the modern day sense, you can do this, the license plate, and there's a want or warrant out for the person, and it's a, not just, oh, he didn't pay his parking tickets, but it's for a violent felony. Okay, yeah, then I understand. But if you're not willing to walk up to a car with your gun holstered, then you shouldn't be a cop, okay? And I've seen in person too many times, oh yeah, the other guy who's not, one guy's walking up to the driver's side, the other guy's on the passenger side, and he draws his gun, and he's pointing it at the ground and whatnot, and he's ready to snap. No, no. Unless you have real reasonable suspicion that that person is likely to be violent, you don't get to pull out a gun, okay? You know, just because two people are battling in their house and you're approaching it because it's a domestic violence, but you don't know how much they're battling. It's noisy, their things are shattering, you know, and whatnot. Are they just, use term from an old movie, roughhouse, playing roughhouse? No, I'm not saying excusing that are right, but nobody's really life is in danger. They're just slapping each other and getting pissed, and yeah, they should not be married or whatever. They should not be living together or whatever. But again, I'm not excusing. You know, violence in self-defense is fine, but I'm not trying to excuse domestic violence here at all. But no, the cops should not be going up to a domestic violence unless they have a reasonable suspicion that somebody has a knife or somebody is doing something else that looks really like it's a threat to themselves or somebody else's life. Then they get to draw their gun. But I've had training and known police officers and worked with them many years. But they're too easy at not even necessarily pointing, but pulling that gun. It's different if we're talking about though of course some of the, and this is part of, we'll go other political here. Women police officers have higher levels of fear because they're physically intimidated by males. So they have a quicker reaction, whether it's to guns or chemical sprays or stun guns or other tasers or whatever else. And there's women who claim that, and I don't know, I think it just fear wrote. She claims that she thought she was pulling her taser out, but pulls out a gun and shoots somebody. So I really, now I've met women police officers who really had it together. Trust me, they can be, but I think there's too much DEI to get women into the police officer's job, and because they just physically aren't there, they resort to other means too quick. That doesn't mean that cops should be willing to be punched or have to wrestle somebody to the ground. No, they shouldn't have to do all that stuff. But if they don't want to do the job, they shouldn't do the job. So they have to be willing to put up with some more danger than the average person, most assuredly. But they still also need to, if they overreact, and how badly they overreact, it may be criminal. And not just, hey, okay, let's see what, yes, there are some of out of control cops. That's absolutely, yes. That's why we have Justice Department, except Rodney King, oops, for instance, did belong in, yeah, Rodney King belonged in jail, but I also don't think he deserved the beating that he got either. Because I was around and I was there for the Rodney King riots. And so, although I, what got captured on footage or whatever, Rodney King did not deserve that beating. He definitely deserved to go to jail. I think those cops got out of control. That's my judgment looking back on it now. Naturally nervous or fearful just can't be cops. I was told first violence is the worst. It's a call. All cops. Yeah. Oh yeah. And yeah. First. Oh yeah. Firsthand. Yes. You have to be the right temperament. You have to have the right training and experience over time. You have to, because I'm not a cop, because I'm not, like I say, I've dealt with the world, not just from bouncing and other security too, including armed security that I've done. But I've never been a cop. But I've also sold lots of guns to cops. I have had training from cops. I've trained cops, just a bit, but in some firearm stuff. So I'm definitely involved, or had been involved in the world, shall we say? But that doesn't make me a cop or one of the, you know, one of the periphery types. But your rookie cop, I'd put him as the third wheel, if you will. I know it's the back seat of cop cars are sort of, armored and protected versus the front seat or whatnot, at least in modern police cars. But I would make him initially the third wheel to a pair of cops, so that every call, every incident that you would send a pair of cops to. And I really don't like the idea. Okay, traffic cops or highway patrol, somebody who's just trying to manage some of that situation. I can see maybe single cops, but I hated working bouncing alone. And normally, and it's, because some of the things, oh, hey, yeah, we're busy for 4 hours, but we want one of you to stay an extra couple hours to close out the thing, the shift, but, most everybody's gone home. We don't want to continue to pay for all 4 or 6 or however many of you, but we want 1 or 2 to stay. And I'm not saying I didn't. I did work some of that once in a while, but mostly not, because I want at least 2 of us there. I want, if there's, even if it's just one person being the problem, and they're drunk, because that's why they're actually, a problem that you would need to use physical situation. Their judgment is not the best, okay? I mean, that's why they're becoming a problem. However big or strong you may look, compared to whoever it is, it would be better to put 3 or 4 big, strong guys around them. So even if they do start reacting, we can, quickly grab hold of that person and get them out without damage to anybody or anything, as opposed to, I can take them in a fight and have to fight them and win, as a single person. No, you want to overwhelm the situation. So, I really, for most policing, not meter maids, maybe, a lot of the highway patrol out here, they're just cruising along roads and they're looking to just give. It's a combination of trying to keep people that are pushing the boundaries of safetyness, driving too fast but recklessly and changing lots of lanes and, really doing that, versus just being oh, hey, there's a car on the side of the road to stop. Let me see what's going on with it. Do they, what kind of help do they need? Or if there's an accident. Yeah, so sometimes, police can work alone, but I really think it should be a minimum of 2 people. And so the earliest cops getting out of, the true rookies, they should send 2 trained cops and have the third one there as learning, and then move it to a senior cop and a less senior cop as the pair, and work your way through that. So you transmit knowledge, they get experience and all that kind of stuff over time. And so I think you can tell, I'm not in any way anti-cop, but, and I know in the modern sense, because so much stuff gets recorded, that you will obviously easily able to go on YouTube and find cops, and sometimes good cops, behaving badly. Whether it's, oh, hey, I have a right to be here. And, no, you gotta go. No, they do truly have a right to be there. You don't have the right to exclude them from a situation. Now, and like an example would be, you have the right to record what's going on. Modern day cell phones. Somebody's being arrested, and I've definitely seen police or law enforcement, I would say, trying to block the ability to record that, getting in the way and pushing them out. But I will totally agree, the police officer doesn't want 1 or 20 people all standing right over them with their cell phones, because they don't know who's going to maybe hit them in the back. And the idea that you need a safe or relatively safe margin of space around you while you make the arrest. So, again, you can have good cops who are overreacting and pushing and blocking and whatever somebody's trying to record, an arrest, and what's going down. Um, and I'm not just saying criminal cops or, bad cops that are just, either routinely make bad judgments or who are, running a criminal enterprise or trying to take bribes. I'm not talking about even those. I'm just talking about cops trying to do a good job, but because of situations, maybe routinely over deal with things. That some of it could just be they've been at the job too long and they gotta go away from it, or they haven't had the right training, or it's just a lot of stress. So yeah, I'm not, and so there has to be consequences, but we do need a certain amount of latitude. Okay, we have lots of people here. I'm gonna end this up pretty soon. Money, 130. Yeah, we're gonna take the money. Okay, let's get out of this. Let's get out of this camp here. Where's my cursor? There's my cursor. Now we're going to save. New. Let's play 01. And so, yes. Yeah, that's, and so elites, the idea of elites, the idea that, and part of the problem, I would also say, with modern day ideas of elites is a lot of people get put into elite positions that don't deserve it. And that they, how do I put this? Just because whatever it is, because we believe in the formulas, whoever is the person put in charge should be good enough because he's been turned into a cog of the person in charge. And so the people below him should just respect the office, the position, the whatever, and do what the guy in charge is saying. And the other guy's, he's no better than us. He doesn't know this any better than us. What makes him the boss, kind of thing? Why should he be the boss? Well, because we've ideologically come up with the idea, well, hey, they're all the same. You get the right experience, you'll be the boss. Because you've been there 5 years, the other guys have only been there for 3 years, the rest of them or less. And so the guy who's been there 5 years, he's the boss. Well, he may not have the right skill set. He may have a more experience, but he may not have the right skill set. So the idea of acknowledging and identifying who are the right types of elites. And I'm not just talking about, again, somebody who can, sit alone in a room and create a program, but somebody who can be an elite needs to be identified in, and it's not like, XYZ formula will do it. No, it's identify through society and recognizing that Bob, yeah, he has it, but Sam, he doesn't. Whatever, however you're defining the various it's. And so Bob is going to be the elite in the room. And the next room that he goes into, he may be the junior person in that room now. Then he may always stay the junior person in that next room above him. But, and somebody else may eventually surpass and go on. Because his natural elite level only goes so far. But yeah, so that is something that I think, whether you look at the Dune novels and the movies, or you're looking at the 18th century, personal or loyalties to people, not blind necessarily, but loyalties to people more than loyalties to systems or formulas. That's what we have. We have loyalties to systems and to formulas. You have to obey the captain because, I'm not talking captain of the ship, I'm talking captain in the army, because he's the captain. Well, yeah, to a point it has to work that way. But we also can't presume that everybody who becomes an officer, who can make it through officer school, is going to be able to be a captain, or is ready enough to be a captain now. And so you have to work that better. Okay, well, that's sort of the chat today. I want to thank Admiral Teague especially, but also Arno. You had a few new people here. Well, of course, Beam Slam. Oh, yes, Snuffy McGee, which I met just a few days ago over on the Slytherin stream, and Elizabeth for coming here and hanging out at least part of the day. And I think Singh left, but thank you all. And I don't know how to pronounce Klon Dun Azueo. I don't know. Sorry, don't know how to parse that word out. I want to thank you all for hanging out with me. I do believe tomorrow and I say we because I believe Arno will be joining, but anybody else wants to join, we will make room. Play some War Thunder, drive tanks, maybe fly a few airplanes, and have fun with that. And over on Slytherin's channel, Tuesday the 9th, I will be on for just an hour, but there's Slytherin Next, which is a bunch of hours of programming of coming up games over on Slytherin's channel for both Slytherin and Matrix publishing companies. So I'll be doing that, and of course, likely back next weekend. So thank you all. See you next time. Thanks so much. Oh, and also, people, I know a lot of you already know, but Admiral Teague has a great channel on YouTube, and he is really working to, focusing on Star Trek, but also other pop culture issues, and you might want to check his channel out, Admiral Teague. So